How are you going to get that first $200,000 deposit? Well, you're going to do whatever it takes. You can get funding from other places other than banks. We've got your grants, you've got your parents, you've got investors. You're becoming an entrepreneur in building your passive property investment portfolio. You want to be able to buy properties with no money down. You pretty much have to go in and just do it. If you keep the progress going and then you buy another property and you're going to have to put money in for that most likely, and then if you get your third or fourth property, what happens is, welcome to the Passive Property Investor Podcast, where I teach you how to stop trading your time for money with property investment. I'm Jerry Parker, your property investment consultant. Let's dive in. Hello, passive property investors. Welcome back to another podcast episode where we're going to be talking about how people buy and how you can buy property with $0. It happens. And this is where we're taking you as well. So, if you've never bought a property at the very beginning of your property journey, there's a lot of daunting tasks in front of you. You've got to have a job, first of all. And then in your job, you have to have some free cash flow coming off of that the banks can have a look at to say that you're worthy, credit worthy. And then you got to have this deposit. You can get it down to 10%, or, you can get the first homeowner grant. That's a very smart thing to do. And that's free money there. And so you've got to get this big hurdle. It might be, $100,000 to $200,000 to get to there first. And then you can go to the bank and borrow the money. And sometimes for their stamp duty, they want to see that cash as well. And then, you're in a property. So it's, you have to put money in. It's a big struggle. But if you keep the progress going and then you buy another property, and you're going to have to put money in for that most likely, and then if you get your third or fourth property, what happens is as they go up in value, you build more equity. And your first property, say if you bought, for easy math, I'll say $500,000. And if it goes up by 10%, well, that's $50,000. And then the next year, another 10%. That's $100,000 in equity, and you get access to $80,000 of that equity from the bank. And if you have two or three of those, well, you have more equity there that you can get access from the bank with, and then you use your equity rather than your cash. And so you're not putting money in. And if you're at the very beginning of your journey, you say, oh, yeah, okay, that's tough. But it's going to take you 5 years to get there. But if you just commit yourself and you buy properties, buy assets that go up in value to build your equity position, this is what's available to you. You don't need to put cash in. You don't need to, take money out of your personal lifestyle to put into these investments. This is where, in this podcast, is what I like to talk about, is to turn you into a capitalist. A lot of times in the media, they put a bad connotation on a capitalist, but it's not. You're just using your assets to build and create more value that way. And it's probably going to be the most transformative thing that's going to ever happen to you in your life, other than getting married. I said that last episode, sorry. And and when you get to that spot to where that your assets are making more than you, then you'll, have this great epiphany of I'm so glad that I've done this. Your future self will thank you. So, it is possible. And so how do you get there at the beginning? How are you going to get that first, say, $200,000 deposit? Well, you're going to do whatever it takes. And you can get funding from other places other than banks. We've got your grants, you've got your parents, you've got investors, you've got, the way professional property operatives do it is they'll use options. And if you see something that's going to go up in value quickly and you go to the owner and say, look, I'll give you $5,000 for the right to buy this property at X price, and give me that right for 12 months, it means you don't have to pay for it for 12 months. Well, then if it goes up in value, then you can exercise that option, buy the property, and make money with no money that way. Yeah, so you haven't bought one before and you're heading down this path and you want to be able to buy properties with no money down. It's going to take a little bit of education and knowledge, and there's no school that's going to teach you this. You pretty much have to go in and just do it. You have to buy your first property, which means you're going to need to get that deposit down, and you're going to need to get familiar with a mortgage broker and a bank. I suggest having two so you can bounce them off each other there and figure out exactly where your finances are. You're going to need a way to find that property. You're going to need real estate agents. You need an investment property expert to show you locations. You need the property analysts to give you location research and uncover areas that are ripe for capital growth, where infrastructure is coming in, new roads are coming in. You need your accountant to help you with your taxes and figure out how much tax you'll be able to save in depreciation on the property. You need to understand how the depreciation works and can bring you cash flow back out of the property. Your accountant helps you that. Well, then you're going to need a quantity surveyor to give you a depreciation report on your property, so you can, calculate that for the tax office and get your reduce your taxable income. So there's a big team to go into this, and it's a business. It's not just a little thing that you do. It becomes a business, and they're not like full-time employees, but you pay them along the way as you go. And like some people like to scrimp out on I'm not going to use a lawyer. I'm going to use a conveyancer, so it's super cheap. Well, don't use the lawyer, and you'll get this advice at the beginning, and it'll be educational, but then he becomes part of your team. And when you have questions, you go to your team. And this is the entrepreneurial method that you're going to be using. You're becoming an entrepreneur in building your passive property investment portfolio. You're not just, a client of someone and buying something based on their advice. You are driving your own capital, your own wealth in a more of an entrepreneurial spirit, and building this team around you, and finding where the properties are and making these purchases. And you do this over time. With your first property, you'll build your team a little bit. And then if you get your second property, you'll expand it. And then eventually you'll be in a position to where you're buying property without any money, because it's a business. You're using that equity, you know your cash flows, and you're just snowballing at the beginning. Your snowball is at the top of the hill right now if you've never bought anything, and it's really hard to get it big. You're probably just packing it together with your hands, and you put it on the ground, you start rolling a little bit, it's sitting there, it's not much. But once you get that snowball rolling downhill, it gets bigger and bigger, faster and faster. And then you don't need to do anything. It just grows on its own, and you don't need to keep nurturing it with more cash. It'll get bigger, as big as you want it to get. You need to learn how to do it first. And it takes effort, and it takes action. You just have to take action and get your first property under your belt. Thanks for tuning in to The Passive Property Investor. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube so you don't miss a single episode. We're on all social media platforms, so feel free to connect with me there. And if you're having specific problems making your first investment or building your portfolio, maybe you don't know which location to invest in, how much you should invest, you're worried about who to trust, reach out for me down below. I will have the answers for you. Don't hesitate. See you on the next episode.